Okay, Cameron, please. No, Cameron was a wee bit late, but he's all good.
Kia ora. Right, well, I'll launch into things. So the crux of my written submission really was something I've been submitted on for several years, and broadly, paraphrased by an ECAN councillor by saying I support raising rates to the levels that they need to be, so that we don't effectively push spending onto our children. Which is a nice thing to say, and I know you've got hard trade-offs to make, but I'd just like to keep that in your mind, and that when we don't spend now, there's many things which come back and we end up paying for down the line. So, but I'd actually like to spend my verbal time on the final paragraph of my submission, and that starts by saying that I think this type of consultation is actually quite harmful to the long-term interests of Christchurch. The consultation documents are huge and so complex. And what that means is that older, richer, whiter, better educated people with more time on their hands have a lot more influence than anyone else in this process. The trade-offs between costs and benefits in the plan are not made clear, and that includes a bunch of costs that are resultant from inaction. And there are a number of things that are needed to make an informed decision not visible, such as changes from the last plan, non-financial costs, opportunities that weren't funded, and outstanding risks. So I provided similar feedback to ECAN, who asked the question, how do we do it better? And I was put on the spot a bit, but I thought, well, for you I might have a bit of time to think about it, so I sort of sat down and thought about it. So I think there's some missing information that could be included in the plan. So some of the things mentioned earlier, the changes from last plan, what was funded and is not now, some non-financial costs. I know these are complex, but I don't think it's good enough to just ignore them. The opportunities that you've received and said no to, and the risks that effectively are outstanding on the implementation of this plan. I also think it would be really useful to include an assessment of how well the plan actually works towards the vision, desired outcomes, strategic priorities, and the targets that we have. So we have a 2030 carbon emission target. This plan launches well into 2030, but I couldn't see an assessment of actually how well the plan met that target. Another thing that you could consider is continuing to trust your staff and putting a lot of faith in them. They have significant expertise in quite complex areas. They understand the impacts of their recommendations, and actually they know what does and doesn't work towards our strategic priorities and community outcomes better than the public do. You could look at bite-sized consultations, so much smaller ones which look at maybe would you rather scenarios, or evaluate the support levels for different projects that you could then compare. You could also look at allowing people to appropriate a discretionary budget and see how they'd do it. Obviously you've got a whole bunch of stuff that is kind of a non-negotiable, but it sort of gives people a bit of ability to say, well, where would we appropriate that other stuff? Another idea is looking at actually putting some more information out there that lets people do some more public analysis. So spreadsheet formats of project and operations information, and the funding that's allocated to each part in this long-term plan versus the last, that would allow some pretty awesome public analysis and debate. You could also consider a citizens' assembly. This could be a group representative of our population that's given some real good education on the long-term plan, the type that you guys kind of receive. I know that would take quite some time, so there'd need to be some compensation for those people. But ultimately, I think you'd get a set of recommendations from an informed panel, that is representative of our population. Finally, I think this plan, should include opportunities for communities to bring new initiatives to life that otherwise don't have a home within CCC funds available. So I know that, like other local governments, CCC's in a difficult landscape at the moment. I know you're working very hard internally to solve some of the problems, but actually many of the solutions for some of your problems will be out in the community. There's plenty of people out there that belong to Christchurch who know how to do things better. Sometimes that's incrementally and sometimes that's radical change. So I feel like there could be benefit if you spent some time seeking to find those people and the opportunities that they see and really enable and support them, hopefully for the long-term benefit of Otatahi. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely brilliant. Any, Aaron?
On your earlier comment about passing the burden on to children, obviously they inherit everything that our forefathers have built and we build on and so on. But interest rates are compounding. So if we put on 10% now, it stays at 10% and then gets added to along the way, and then they receive all of that.
Yep.
So they receive really massive rates in the future because it's compounding.
Yeah.
So your thoughts
get all
on
that. So I'm not making the argument that financial debt is nothing to consider. What I'm making the argument for is that all debt should be considered, debts and opportunity costs. So that's kind of the, I know it's a hard thing to do, but I think I said last year that you've got experts within your council who can solve some really complex problems and give some really, really good advice. And actually looking at saying like our target of 2030 being, is it 50% reduction in emissions, and not even evaluating that in our long-term plans, pretty bad in my thoughts.
Okay.
It'll be the same as this year.
We are 2 minutes early, so Les can have the last one before lunch.
I enjoyed your comment around kind of utilising community expertise a bit more and thinking. What's your view on participatory budgeting? Because I know the Federal for Local Government made some recommendations around enabling community input earlier into the planning stages, particularly before the draft budget is set, because as we know, it is much harder to change things once they're in place. Do you have any thoughts on how we could maybe pilot that?
So I have to claim ignorance. I don't know much about participatory budgeting, but I mean, I presume it's something like a citizens' assembly. So look, I think it's a great idea, and I mean, you probably need to give a bit of thought as to, well, who might you want on that table. You'd probably want to make sure that they're representative of the whole of Otatahi, and I'd say maybe a panel about this size, and honestly pay them to get out of work for a week and actually teach them about the sorts of trade-offs that they might need to make, that you guys need to make, and hope that you get some insights that way.
Thank you, Cameron. Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
Good on you guys, and we will be back here at 1:35 on the dot. Thank you.